Good morning and welcome to Furloughed with Vegan Pete, episode 5. I'm Vegan Pete. I'm furloughed at the moment, so I'm getting my social interaction here with all of you amazing people. Whether you've lost your job, got furloughed like me, or you're working from home, this little show is a place where we can all get that social interaction that we've been lacking while being cooped up inside. It's a rainy day here in Southern California, so I need this interaction a little bit more today than usual. So I think we're going to have a really good time. In case you're new here, I just like to pick some news stories that I find throughout the day, do my little take on them, see what you guys have to say about them as well. So definitely put your opinions in the Twitch chat. And if you want to call up, you are more than welcome to. All you have to do is join the Discord, and I'm typing that in Twitch chat right now. Join the Discord, hop in the On Deck channel, and then if I see you there, I will drag you into live on air, and we will see what you have to say. And if you want to comment on a story I've been talking about, amazing. If you have your own story that you want to talk about and alert me to, I would love that as well. I just want to make sure you guys are an important part of this show. It's with Vegan Pete, not only Vegan Pete, not just me talking. I want to hear from all of you as well. So let's get into it. Let's start out with a little bit of good news. We talked about this person a bit yesterday when we were watching the coronavirus PSAs. His wasn't the best of the bunch, but Matthew McConaughey is doing some more good. As you know, at this time, the most at risk for serious COVID-19 cases and are having to self-isolate in their senior living homes are the elderly, and that can be very lonely. Well, the staff at the Enclave at Round Rock Senior Living in Round Rock, Texas, set up their residents to play some bingo via video chat so they can interact with each other and play bingo like they were used to playing in one room together, but they could each stay in their separate rooms, stay safe. And for this, Matthew McConaughey jumped on and was the one reading all of the bingo balls. So he was calling I-9, I-9. Has anyone got I-9? So Matthew McConaughey and his family were all live on the video chat, calling out the bingo balls, giving the elderly a little bit of social interaction. And that can be really sad for the elderly to be having to self-isolate, can't even hang out with their friends, can't have their family visit, because that's the most important thing. You can't have people visiting these senior living centers who have the possibility of having coronavirus, because we saw this in Washington at the very beginning, and it can wipe out a whole senior living center. So thought this was really cool of the staff at the senior living place and Matthew McConaughey and his family for doing a little good, making some people get a little social interaction and have a lot of fun. So I thought that was pretty cool. Now, something that has become a popular thing to do during these quarantines has been baking bread. I've seen a lot of pictures on Facebook and Twitter of people baking away. Mostly it seems sourdough, and this has led to a bit of a flour shortage. The grocery stores are barren of flour, and my wife actually likes to bake bread as well, so she actually saw the shortage coming and bought a 25-pound bag probably over a month ago. And yeast is also a big component for bread and is sold out in a lot of places. If you compare the week of March 15th last year to March 15th of this year, the sales of yeast grew more than 647% and is sold out just about everywhere. So a little tip for people, if you're looking for flour or yeast, we've had success looking for stores that might be offering groceries now to try to stay in business. Like, they don't usually sell groceries, but they're doing whatever they can to try to stay open. We have a local chocolate place here that also did cakes as well. So they started selling the 25-pound bags of flour that they got for themselves to usually bake with but they started ordering extra in case anyone needed flour. You can also buy eggs, fruit and veg, pasta, many more things. So go online and check out some of your local bakeries, delis, convenience stores that might be selling stuff like that if your local grocery is sold out. And this next one might be a little more specific to San Diego because we have so many breweries. We have over 200 breweries in San Diego County. But you can ask them about any yeast they might have available because yeast is also a component in brewing beer. One of our local breweries was actually giving out some yeast for free to people who are looking to bake bread for the first time. So that's pretty cool. And you have to really look at alternatives to the grocery store if your grocery store is sold out of a lot of things. And the Real Hot Chili Pepper is saying your local bakery has closed down, and that is unfortunate. Maybe eventually they'll see that there is a market of people needing stuff that they can't get at their local grocery, and maybe they open back up and sell you some flour, eggs, stuff like that that they use for baking, and other people want it as well. So with anything that people are having fun with, there's always the opposite side of the crowd who want to ruin other people's fun. And the whole baking bread during the quarantine thing is no different. There's always some people who want to be contrarians and push back against other people's fun. They are now saying that baking, and specifically baking sourdough bread, is wasteful because you have to feed your starter fresh flour and disregard some of the old. This is a stupid argument because most people that are baking sourdough know what to do with the part of the starter that you disregard. We don't just throw it away. You can use sourdough starter to make biscuits, pizza dough, pancakes, waffles, pretzels, crackers, a variety of other baked goods. So while it could be wasteful if you're just throwing the old starter into the bin, but if you're actually being smart and using it to make other things, then I think it's okay. And Chili said, "You're sad I didn't see your yeast joke. Well, let's go looking back. One could say the yeast sales have risen. Ba-dum-bum. Oops. I don't have my right stream deck open for my ba-bum-bum, so I'll give you a Howard, yeah. Apparently, that's not coming through either. Or my headphones turned off. Who knows? All right. Last week we talked about the lack of sports entertainment because all the leagues are suspended right now. To fill the void, there was an NBA 2K20 tournament that started last week that had 16 NBA players competing. Well, I watched the first match that was between the number 1 seed Kevin Durant and number 16 seed Derrick Jones Jr. And honestly, I don't think I've played a basketball video game since NBA Jam back in the day. It's just not my thing nowadays. And I can't say that watching this changed my mind or gave me the urge to play NBA 2K20. I'm sure it's much more fun to play than to watch, but I was actually pretty bored watching this. And I would imagine someone who doesn't regularly watch video games online was pretty bored watching this as well. I was hoping that the two NBA stars playing were going to have a little more personality than they showed up with and play it up a little bit, have a little bit of more showmanship to them, do a little trash talking. I'm sure that's why the majority of people were watching, to see some NBA stars, not watch people play a basketball video game. The two of them would occasionally talk to each other. They were on voice communications. How are you? Are you staying safe? When was the last time you played? Stuff like that. Felt like they were just playing any old regular match of NBA 2K20, whatever. I didn't watch any more of the matches after that. Hopefully the other matches had a little bit more personality and showmanship to them. And So it was mostly the video game screen, and then you had both of their faces, their video cameras in the corners, and they could switch in between them so they could focus in on one person or not. So it wasn't a bad production value or anything like that. But there was no commentator for the actual stream. You had the in-game commentator, so you had the pre-recorded basketball announcers talking after every basket or whatever, and that's fine when you're just playing the game by yourself. But when you're watching a stream, you don't want a commentator commentating on like how the video game people are playing, like the characters in the game are playing. You want someone commentating on how the player is playing, like what they're doing, how they're setting their lineup, stuff like that. And there was none of that. So it was just the in-game commentators. There was no separate commentator talking about how the game is played, basically, or telling any specific strategies that either of the players were using. So I thought that was a little bit lacking for the event itself. And then the two people I saw, they just didn't have any repertoire with each other. They seemed to be friends, but they just weren't very talkative. And Jafango saying the fun is watching NFL stars play each other. They have fun. Yeah, I think it's all going to depend on how vocal, how animated these players are while they're playing something. And who knows, maybe Madden is more has more trash talkers than NBA 2K. Who knows? So that's my little review of the actual event. This isn't actually the biggest story to come from this, though. As you know, an industry that was hit hard from all the sports being in limbo is the betting industry. And people are itching to put some money down on something. They've had to turn to things like the weather to bet on. Yes, you can even bet on the weather right now. So when odds makers got word of this NBA 2K tournament, of course they made some betting lines for people to get in on. They're looking for any way to take your money right now. The only problem came when it turned out that this wasn't actually being played live like we all expected it to be. It was pre-recorded, which I guess you need to do if it's going to be on something like ESPN, because you need to work in commercial breaks and stuff like that. So it was pre-recorded, which means someone knew the results ahead of time. And when one person knows the results ahead of time, then you can be damn sure that many people know the results ahead of time. KK McLeod says, ever see Conan on Mortal Kombat 10 with a Marshawn and Gronk play Clueless Gamer? I have. That was an amazing segment, and I feel like Clueless Gamer has gone a little downhill since its origins, but it has been a really good segment on Conan. And when I love Marshawn Lynch in anything. I will watch Marshawn Lynch all day. Marshawn Lynch had a cameo in the first episode of Westworld, and I think they did it perfectly. Didn't give him too many lines, starting him off slow, but he's been in the previews for Westworld coming up, so I can't wait for more Marshawn Lynch in Westworld. So, this was pre-recorded. And, of course, when all the money started coming down on the side of the 16th seed, Derek Jones Jr., it was obvious that the winner was known and they had to stop taking bets. And this isn't the first time something like this has happened. If you remember, not too long ago, we had the GOAT tournament, the greatest of all time Jeopardy tournament with James, Ken, and Brad. Of course, we all know that Jeopardy is pre-recorded. Despite knowing this, online sportsbooks were still taking bets on who the winner would be. But then, of course, before the last game, it leaks who the winner is. All the money comes in on the eventual winner. They have to stop the betting, and news stories start being made with the headlines that spoil the outcome before it airs. So I am all for gambling. However, people have fun. I know it's fun to put a little bit of money down, especially on like a Monday night game that you don't really care about. Even putting $10 makes that game all of a sudden really interesting and a lot of fun to watch. and you're spending, more than $10 going to a movie that might be shit. And you might have a bad time going to a movie. While with sports, you put a little money on that, and it's like an automatic good time, even if you don't give a shit about either of those teams. So I'm all for gambling. But please, please stop doing it on events that are pre-recorded. It never works out well. Someone is always going to know the winner, and there's always going to have some money coming in from people that know the results. And I can't say I would do anything different. Like, people will bet on anything. They'll bet on, like, Oscar season, who's going to win the Oscar. And if I was that company that, stuffed the envelopes with the winner, you got to be smart, though. If you're going to bet and you're employed by people like this, you have to, like, bet $500. You can't bet, like, $10,000. Just keep it simple. Try to make an extra few months of rent every year or something like that. That's how you do it smart. You don't want to draw attention to yourself. McLeod says, betcha $100 we don't clear E5S tonight. Well, I would take that bet because I think we are going to clear E5S tonight. Chili Pepper says, $10 on sunny weather till quarantine ends, and then rain all year. Well, wouldn't that be some shit? And I think that's a possibility in London, right? Or you're not in London, but in the UK, where it's dark and gloomy all the time. Tell you what, I don't think anyone would have bet that San Diego this time of year is going to have a week straight of rain that we're getting right now. So if you had that, you might have won yourself a little bit of money. So there's actually a decent amount of sports news this week as we're going through. One sport that isn't closing during the COVID-19 pandemic is the UFC. And in a location that he is keeping a secret and will not have an audience, Dana White, president of the UFC, is planning on going ahead with UFC 249 on April 18th. At this secret hidden location, there will be fights every week for 2 months. And after the 2 months, it gets even more interesting. TMZ is reporting that Dana White is close to securing a private island to have fights on. And at this fight island, they will host mega fights with the biggest stars in the sport and fly them all to the island with proper precautions and screening. And, as long as they are keeping the staff and the fighters safe, holding these events without an audience, I'm fine with them continuing on. As long as they're, testing people before they get into the facility, can't let anyone in that has a fever, can't be letting anyone in that has any single symptom of the coronavirus, I'm okay with it. And I'm guessing that the UFC, like most sports, make more money off TV deals and pay-per-views than they do off of the actual ticket sales sold for the event. So they're probably still able to make a decent amount of money from this. Jafanko says, I'll make a bet. I bet that Phoenix will have sun for the next week and a half. Going really out on a limb there, Jafango. Fight Island sounds like the sequel to Fight Club. Not quite Mortal Kombat. But I kind of got to that same place that you guys were going for, too. This whole thing about a Fight Island sounds like the beginning of an action movie. All the biggest and elite fighters all traveling to a remote island. Something happens and they are all forced to fend for themselves in a Hunger Games-esque battle royale. I'm sure we can get Arnold and Sly to take part in this. Basically hit up everyone from the Expendables. Get Van Damme, Ronda Rousey, whoever. Get them all in there. We got Street Fighter, Bloodsport 3, the start of Dead Island. I never played Dead Island, so I don't know if that's a movie or a game. But that's what I'm leaning towards. So someone write up that script, make it happen. Who wouldn't like to see a Hunger Games with all MMA fighters, just seeing how they're going to take each other out? I would like that a lot. All right, moving on from sports, let's talk a little bit of... That's literally the plot of Mortal Kombat. I did not know that. I know I watched the movie a really long time ago, but for the life of me, I could not tell you the plot of it. Chili Pepper still has footage of him playing Dead Island 2 about 7 years ago before it was scrapped. Let's move on to some video games, guys. That's what we're all here for, right? Ahead of the official release date, more and more reviews are being added to Metacritic for the Final Fantasy VII Remake. And if you've been holding your breath, holding off on that order, hoping that it was going to be good, it looks like you can exhale. So far the reviews have been overwhelmingly positive. And at the time of this show, it's sitting at an 87 out of 100, which makes it tied for the third best PlayStation 4 game of the year, tied with Doom Eternal and behind Dreams and Kentucky Route Zero TV Edition, which I had never even heard of. I have no idea what that game is. Pepper says, 87, the first year Final Fantasy came out. Boom. Yeah, Mocha Jones, I don't know what Kentucky Route Zero TV Edition is either, but apparently it's ranked higher than Final Fantasy VII at the moment. Probably some little indie game that got some good press. There aren't many negative reviews, but the theme that the negative reviews have shared was about the pacing of the game. That it felt like there was too much filler in between important parts. Thankfully, my friend and fellow podcaster Chili was kind enough to throw a donation my way for the game, so I will be able to play this at release and report back with my thoughts on it as well. So thank you so much for that, Chili. I'm really excited to play the Final Fantasy VII Remake this weekend. I'm also really excited that I beat another Final Fantasy game just a couple days ago on Sunday. I beat Final Fantasy VIII. Kinda. At the end, I have to admit, I turned on the don't take any damage cheat because I'm doing this mostly for story. So, I'm a fan of MMOs. That's why I gave it a shot. I gave 14 a shot. 14 was actually my very first Final Fantasy game. And because I ended up really liking Final Fantasy XIV, I wanted to get the references of past games that are made in Final Fantasy XIV. So I started working my way through previous Final Fantasy games. I started with 10, then 9, and now I just finished 8. So I have a few thoughts about Final Fantasy VIII that people, every time I stream and mention Final Fantasy VIII, people ask me what I thought about it. So I thought I'd put together a few thoughts on this. I was playing the remaster, so I had better graphics than the original. It was a fun game, and I would say it's definitely worth the time and money to play it. It was fun, it was definitely worth the money, and it probably will at least give you a minimum of 50 hours of gameplay if it's your first time through like mine was. And I'm sure it can give you way more than 50 if you do all the side stuff that I definitely didn't do. I'm going mostly for the MSQ, the main story. And while I liked Final Fantasy VIII, I would put it behind 10 and 9, and that ranking was pretty easy for me. I definitely had it behind both of those. It wasn't really close. But at the same time, I don't want to minimize that I did get a lot of enjoyment out of this game. It just wasn't my favorite behind 9 and 10. The battle system was good. I enjoyed the pace of the fights and the pace of play. And I really enjoyed getting to use your summons or guardian force as they're called in Final Fantasy VIII. It's really satisfying getting to use them as much. I feel in the other games that I played, 10 and 9, I didn't really usually get to use them as much. It was more of like a last ditch effort. I'm using these to try to not die, to try to pull a fight out of my ass. But I really enjoyed getting to use the guardian forces or GFs a lot in Final Fantasy VIII. I maybe used the GFs a little too much and depended on them instead of actually learning the ins and outs of the junction system. I will say that the junction system is not very intuitive. It's also kind of tedious, and there were certain points when you would change parties and have to redo all your junctions and abilities, which was super annoying. For me, with each Final Fantasy game that I've played so far, after I beat it, I feel like I immediately want to play it again because I finally have a grasp of the entire battle system and I know I could play it so much better the next time. Final Final Fantasy VIII was like that as well, and with a good understanding of the junctioning system, I'm sure the game would be a lot easier and probably a lot more rewarding because I'd probably spend more time getting the right spells so I can junction the best things in each junction spot. I would level up the abilities of the Guardian Force a little different to make sure I got stuff at certain points. KK McLeod says certain points, 1,000 points. Yes, I maybe downplayed how often you had to redo your junctioning. It was quite often. Chili Pepper says card mod turns cards into spells and laugh early on. Yes, I probably could have played a lot more Triple Triad 2. I had a separate save file going that I was just playing Triple Triad on. Triple Triad was so much better in Final Fantasy VIII than it was implemented in Final Fantasy XIV. I can't believe that the Final Fantasy XIV team didn't take a more direct influence from Final Fantasy VIII Triple Triad. I think it would have made it better. But overall, I found the battle system pretty good, and the pace of the battles very good. Liked using the GFs a lot. Easily, for me, the worst part of this game was Squall's inner monologuing and dialogue in general. Maybe it's because I'm 2 decades past being a teenager, but man, was he annoying. And although his dialogue was the worst, the others weren't much better. And I don't know if it was from bad translations from the original Japanese, but it just wasn't doing it for me. It also seemed like there wasn't much growth out of Squall. Through his inner monologuing, he recognizes his faults, but never really makes any actions to fix them. It doesn't really feel like Squall grew throughout the story. There was definitely a love story. I guess love is one of the themes of the game in general, but even that love story was pretty sloppily told, so I wasn't a biggest fan of the dialogue in this game. KK McLeod says, fucking random plus same plus plus, talking more about Triple Triad. So happy festival fireworks though. No happy festival fireworks. Oh, so that's an alluding to Final Fantasy X. Yes, and Mocha Jones, lots of angsty teenagers. And they just didn't have good dialogue. I don't know if it was like a technical system for, I don't know what this came out on, on PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2. Probably PlayStation 2, I would think. Like, I don't know if that was any limitation that they couldn't put any more dialogue in there, but it wasn't good. And while Cid is probably my favorite character in Final Fantasy XIV, Cid was awful and a waste in Final Fantasy VIII. Totally worthless. Okay, so it was PS1. So when I put that in context for a PS1 game, it was good. Probably very good at the time. I will say I don't think the dialogue holds up, though. Like how old TV shows, some of them hold up, some of them don't hold up. I would say the dialogue in this does not hold up. Wait till you see Cid in Final Fantasy VII. He is awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it, Chili. KK McLeod says, I've read that there's a huge amount of dialogue in Final Fantasy VII and on PS1. See, I'd rather have more dialogue and have it make sense. I'd rather have a little bit more like throwaway dialogue. I'm like, okay, that was a little long-winded, but at least I got something out of it. The dialogue in Final Fantasy VIII was short, confusing, and there was no growth. But despite that, I still did enjoy the majority of the story. I really started to enjoy the story when we got into the whole sorceress shenanigans that ultimately tied back to everyone at the orphanage and their fates being linked together. I would definitely say fate is another theme of this game. And even though there was a bunch of timey-wimey BS that I always talk about hating, I was able to kind of look through it a little bit. We got through that part, and it ended up being a pretty good story. I liked the sorceress, Ultimecia, the kind of sorceress succession between the different sorceresses. That was pretty cool. I enjoyed that we had all known each other from the orphanage, and they kind of, I don't know if it was a good thing. They kind of just retconned in that the GFs were blocking our memory, and that's why we didn't remember anyone. I don't really know what I think about that. It's kind of something that I just yada over, and I was like, okay, that's why we don't remember anything. But I don't know if I would call that good. But it was acceptable. The beginning of the story with the seed and being a child mercenary was a bit slow and uninteresting to me, but once we got to the sorceress stuff, the story picked up, and I very much enjoyed the game overall. They teased the GF thing from the start. I don't know. I don't remember it until we got to the orphanage, and Irvine was like, well, I remember, because I haven't been using the GFs. It's the Guardian Force that's doing it. That's how I remember it going. But that was my little review of Final Fantasy VIII. If you've been on the fence about picking it up, I would say it's definitely worth the time. So, worth the time, worth the money. If you're a Final Fantasy fan, you will find parts of the game that you enjoy, even if you don't enjoy the whole thing. And once you have an appreciation of the junction system, like if you don't care about experiencing everything on its own, if you're not doing a blind playthrough, I would definitely recommend looking up a YouTube video or something about the junctioning system, because I think it will probably add to your enjoyment of the game if you know how to do that from the beginning. And yeah, look it up if you don't care about having a blind playthrough. Jafango says Seifer is awesome. I got to disagree on that one. I thought he could have been awesome, but I thought he was painfully underused and was out of the story fairly quickly. I thought he could have been more of a big boss for Squall, but it didn't really turn out that way. You also, Jafango says, however, I love Final Fantasy VIII because it related to me a lot. I was the kid that was always in my head overthinking things. Well, I can definitely see that. And I'm in my head a lot too, but hopefully I have better dialogue in my head than Squall did, because I was just not buying it. He got kind of annoying. KK McLeod agrees, yeah, and we beat Seifer way too easily. All right, so moving on from one review, I have a reluctant review of episode 2 of Tiger King, because I was told some people like to hear what I had to say about him. So not much I have watched episode 2 now of Tiger King. Like I said, reluctantly. I don't like giving shit people any sort of press, but I'll do it. I know it's in the zeitgeist of pop culture right now. Not much has changed, in my opinion, from episode 1. They are still all freaks, and really they are garbage human beings. Anyone legitimately calling for the release of Joe Exotic from prison and not just doing it as a meme, I think you're an idiot. In my power ranking of garbage human people, after episode 1, I definitely had Doc as the top garbage person, then Joe, and then Carol. After episode 2, I have the same ranking, but if I could move up Doc anymore, I would. Even if you don't factor in the animal abuse, he is the worst. This latest episode introduced his wives, and yes, that is plural. And it's not like he just met these women when they were all in their 30s. He's into R. Kelly shit and grooming these women from when they are teenagers. This dude is a straight up cult leader. And if you didn't need any more reasons not to support these garbage people, how about them not paying staff a minimum wage, let alone a living wage? Doc paid people $100 per week after bragging about how much they were charging people to come in to the sanctuary in the first episode. So you're making a whole bunch of money. You're paying people slave wages. Doc was paying people $100 per week, and they are working like 12-hour days. Joe was actually paying people a little bit more, like a whopping $130 a week. I guess he was able to pay a little bit more because of all the food that he was feeding to the animals being like expired Walmart meat. I don't think expired bologna is something that is in a tiger's natural diet. Okay, I don't think bologna is good for tigers. And it didn't seem like Carol had any paid staff. Like, if she had any paid staff, we did not see them in this episode. It seemed that she was relying 100% completely on volunteers. And I just can't get behind any business model like that. I don't care if you're a nonprofit or not. If you have people that are showing up to volunteer regularly, which it seems like they were, some people were volunteering or were interns for a full year. Anyone that is permanent like that needs to be paid. That's ridiculous that people are interning and volunteering for this long when it doesn't even seem like there is a job for them to graduate to. So I thought all of these people are awful. I don't know why I'm watching it, to be honest. I don't like it. Best show on TV right now, in my opinion, is Westworld. And if anyone else, if we get like one person who says they want to talk about Westworld, I would gladly talk about Westworld instead of Tiger King. Carol workers were volunteers. She took advantage of them. I totally agree. I mean, I have volunteered at animal sanctuaries before, and they were like farm animal sanctuaries, like hurt cows that came from a dairy farm or something like that, and volunteer to help out. But these places didn't need it, and they would have like volunteers once a month, and it always seemed like, I've only gone a couple times, but it always seemed like I was more in the way. They would have preferred that I wasn't there because the workers just wanted to do their job instead of trying to get some volunteers. But I get it. It's an education thing as well. It's good to have like kids volunteer at something like that. But all these places that I checked out and volunteered at a couple times, they all had paid staff. They had veterinarians who lived at the sanctuary and got paid. I haven't seen a veterinarian in this show yet. I don't know who's actually giving any sort of care to these big cats. And what do we got here? Mocha Jones, he's saying it. They're white trash. I don't think you're going to get any disagreements from me on that one. KK has not watched Westworld, but you should. Tiger King is a wild ride, at least. That it is. I just don't know if I'm doing a good thing by talking about it. I have a little fight with myself any time I watch an episode. Something that I do watch, though, and I have a little less qualms with, even though I do have issues with the NFL in general. According to Adam Schefter of ESPN, HBO's all-access look at NFL training camp, Hard Knocks, will double dip in Los Angeles for the upcoming preseason. Hard Knocks is going to feature both the Los Angeles Rams and the Los Angeles Chargers. Quickly, Broly says, "Tell me why I should watch Westworld. I've heard it's good, but I know nothing about it." So, Westworld takes place in and I'm going to try to do this without spoiling much, I'm going to call it a near future, maybe like 50 years, I'm estimating in the future. And we're making a lot of progress in AI and robotics. And it brings up the theme of, when does a robot, something that man has created, when does it take on its own life and have its own sentience? So it hits on those themes about what's real, what's not real, why we are doing this. It's not purely for entertainment that we have a Westworld. So Westworld is a theme park, basically that you can go and live out your fantasies of being a cowboy. That's how it's presented to the public anyway, but that's not truly what they think will be their moneymaker. It's very more nefarious, and kind of hits like stuff on data mining, and then in the newest season we get even more about what is real and what is not real, and it's very interesting overall. It's really hard to explain without spoiling anything, so maybe I'll put a little more thought into that and have a little elevator pitch for you next time. That's what I had off the top of my head, trying very hard not to spoil anything for you. So I'll work on my elevator pitch for that a bit. But getting back to Hard Knocks, for those of you that don't know, Hard Knocks is a show on HBO where they usually follow one NFL team through training camp and the preseason. And this ends up being really interesting because an NFL training camp and preseason consists of people trying to make a NFL roster. So for the stars that you always see on the field, might not be that entertaining, or the show might not feature on them that much because there's no suspense on if Tom Brady is going to make the team. We all know Tom Brady is going to make the team. They might get a little story on how a star is spending their offseason or something like that. But where the show really shines is showing the process of making an NFL team for a player that either got drafted in the late rounds or maybe got invited to camp after going undrafted. So it's really cool seeing all the training that these, young men put in to trying to make an NFL roster, and they have some really great personalities on there. You get really attached to people, you're rooting for them, wanting them to make the team, and it can just be heartbreaking when eventually the head coach asks for the playbook back. Once you have to give your playbook back, it basically means that's it for you, and you're gonna have to hope to be picked up by another team because your time with the current team is over. Should have a show called Harder Knocks and it's boot camp. I feel like we've had something on boot camp before, maybe like way back in the heyday of when TLC was still their learning channel, or maybe something on the History Channel. I feel like we got something about Marines and boot camp before. I don't know. I have to look into that. I feel like I remember something. But I actually really like Hard Knocks, and even if you don't like football, the stories that they're telling are pretty interesting because it's not just about football. It's very much about the struggle of people trying to make the team for the very first time. And that's the part I really like about it. You don't have to know a damn thing about football to enjoy this show. And for my UK fans, that's American football, not UK football, soccer. And so those are the big news stories that I had today. Also, I had Boris Johnson, UK Prime Minister, was admitted to the hospital and went to the ICU. Thankfully, it was reported at the beginning of the show by Chili Pepper that Boris Johnson has been returned home. He's made it out of the hospital. So wish him the best of health. Now, here's a nice little story to end on. A landlord who has the ability to make life for his tenants a little bit easier. Mario Salerno, a landlord in New York with 80 apartments, is doing his part to make life a little bit better during times like this, and he has decided that he is not requiring rent for the month of April. And for many Americans, our housing cost, whether it's your mortgage or your rent, is our biggest monthly expense. So to have even a 1 month where you're able to keep that payment in your pocket can make a huge difference and can mean the difference between putting food on the table or missing a couple meals. So good on Mario Salerno. That's something awesome. I know not every landlord is in the position to do this, and maybe he can only do it for 1 month. But even just 1 month makes a huge difference. And there's going to be, they've talked about some mortgage relief for people in mortgages, having it basically put on hold for a few months. Hopefully that happens for people that are affected by that. But they need to do the same with rent. Honestly, they need to find a way where like people just don't have to pay rent, and then landlords can submit to the government to get paid by that. I think that would be the biggest stimulus, being able to keep money in the masses' pockets, and then having the government pay the landlords. And McLeod's saying a mortgage is pretty insane. Jafengo agrees. Rent and utilities and loans, they all add up. So good on Mario Salerno for helping out the tenants that he has. And this guy apparently owns a auto shop as well that he's kept open just because he's done some work for first responders and teachers. He's like, they still need their cars worked on, so I'm gonna work on them to make sure they can get to work. He's like, I don't want to be doing auto work right now, but he seems to be doing his part overall, which is what I want to focus on a time like this. Everyone doing their part to help out. All right. So I think that is going to be it for today. As always, if you want to send any stories to me to cover, please do that via Discord. You can either DM me or put it in the Furloughed with Vegan Pete section. I want to thank you all so much for coming out and participating, giving us all that social interaction that we've been missing out on, being stuck at home. In case you're new here, I'm aiming to do this show every weekday for the foreseeable future. So hang out 10 o'clock a.m. Pacific every Monday through Friday. Would love to have more people call in. We haven't had a call in since episode 1. So I'm hoping some of you guys decide to call in for anything you got going on. You want to talk about a game you just beat? You can call in and talk about that. I just want to get this social interaction going. So thank you so much. I will be here tomorrow, 10 a.m. Pacific, and I hope everyone has an amazing day. Goodbye.